Biden unveiled a massive infrastructure proposal on Wednesday, and the administration is gearing up to release their first budget proposal. For more, I want to bring in former OMB Director Russ Vought. Hi, Russ. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with the infrastructure plan. Biden unveiled that proposal during an event in Pittsburgh on Wednesday. The big number is $2.25 trillion, but just $620 billion of that would go toward actual infrastructure. What are your thoughts on this plan?
Well, it's even worse than that. Even within that $620 billion for infrastructure, as they've advertised it, only about $160 billion is for roads and bridges and airports and ports, the things that most American people would think of as infrastructure. So, this is unfortunately something that the American people are being sold a bill of goods, saying this is something that they support based on infrastructure and fixing potholes and their rickety bridges. But this is unfortunately much more than that. It is a very massive, radical spending bill that funds a lot of different things and pays for it with a tax increase.
Republicans are opposed to passing such a large spending bill packed with left-wing agenda items. Will Democrats be able to get this proposal passed even without GOP support?
They certainly have their work cut out for them. Right now, they have Democrats in the House that are saying that they no longer support it. That's only a handful, but a handful matters. And then, of course, in the Senate, you have Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin. They're going to take a long look at this bill. And I don't know if we know whether they are going to insist on a bipartisan debate and whether it's too bill and taxes too much for their liking. So I think the jury is still out on that. This is going to require a lot of analysis. But what we know now is that this is not an infrastructure bill, and it's going to wreck our economy and allow for us to no longer be globally competitive.
As you briefly mentioned, Democrats do plan to fund this proposal through tax hikes, specifically on corporations and those making more than $400,000 a year. How does that impact an economy that's still recovering from the coronavirus pandemic?
It's a serious time to be talking about raising taxes. I mean, I'm not supportive of raising taxes at any time, but you certainly don't want to do it when the economy is trying to get out of the hole that the last year's pandemic and economic shock put us in. And then to be talking about raising corporate taxes from 21% to 28% and potentially more as they try to put in some constraints to keep businesses from fleeing to other countries. It is what will end up happening is you'll have fewer investments, fewer jobs, higher prices, and we'll have a worse economy as a result.
The Biden OMB is set to release their first budget proposal soon. You headed that office under President Trump. What are you expecting this budget proposal to look like?
I'm expecting deficits as far as the eye can see, heavy spending, unfortunately not enough spending in the areas that we need it to, in the area of defense and the border. I think it's going to be something that I don't think they're going to even release it for a long time in terms of the specific numbers. I think they're going to do a preview budget to try to put their imprimatur on what each agency should get to be able to get the appropriations process started on Capitol Hill. But I think what you're going to see is a little bit of a delay between when they put out the official budget, because I don't think they want to. I think they want to bury the numbers, the deficit path that they're looking at, and the amount of debt that the country is going to take on over the next 10 years.
Currently, the U.S. national debt has now surpassed the size of the U.S. GDP for the first time since, I think, the 30s. How much longer is that sustainable, and how much bigger can it get before we start to really see the impact?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge right now, is that we've now crossed the line of where you're now moving in a direction that you don't want to in terms of being a healthy economy. And you never know when you're going to get to the point where you have a crisis. And I think that's the challenge, is that good economic policy would suggest that you make economies and save for when you're going to have a year like we had last year with the pandemic and economic shock. And everyone was saying last year, we got to do what's necessary. I was one of those people. But that doesn't mean you put yourself on that kind of trajectory moving forward so that you don't have the ability to both respond to China and the threat that poses and deal with future crises that we know is a part of the next 10 years.
All right, former OMB Director Russ Vought joining us to discuss Biden's infrastructure plan and the upcoming budget proposal from the White House. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
You bet.